Hi, my name is Mike Connell, and I have a Beta 200 22 model race edition, and this video is going to be short and sweet and explain how to clean the power valve on this bike. It would probably apply to the 125 as well, although I don't have any experience with the 125. The power valve sticking issue is something that comes up often. You see it on the Facebook group pages, and from my experience, this is my second Beta 200. About every 40 hours or so, you need to pull this power valve mechanism and clean it. Otherwise, you'll experience the sticking that people describe. You hear different descriptions for it. Sometimes people will say that it sounds like the pipe fell out of the front of the cylinder, or maybe something's in the air box, or the silencer clogged up. To me, it's kind of a moan that you hear, and most of the time you're going to notice it when you have entered a corner, and as you get ready to exit and roll the throttle back on, the bike feels dead and lacking power. And that's because the power valve's stuck in the wide open position because you've been throttling it before you approach that corner, and it's stuck in that wide open position. And usually a couple of blips of the throttle and it'll free back up. At a race this weekend, I was riding an enduro here in Oklahoma, and in the course of the 3 or 4 hours that it took to run that enduro, it happened to me twice. So I am going to describe to you how to clean this. One thing that you'll want to do first off is go ahead and pull the pipe and silencer, and I like to take off the seat and the gas tank just to give me better access. Okay, so here is the 200 Beta that I'm going to work on. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to pull the cover off of the power valve here, and I am going to come up here on the front of the engine. I'm going to pull these bolts out that hold the flange on, and of course over on the other side of the engine here, I am going to pull this access cover. So I'll do that now. One thing I'll tell you is when you take the flange off the front of the cylinder, be careful. Sometimes you can salvage the gasket. Other times the gasket will tear. I'm hoping I can salvage mine. Okay, I pulled these covers off and I got lucky in all 3 cases. The gaskets were fine. Notice that this gasket stays on because it's pinched back behind this rubber piece here. I pulled the flange off the front of the cylinder here. The reason I'm doing that is I'm going to pull my flapper for the exhaust valve out through that hole when I'm done. And over here on the other side of the bike, this one came off and the gasket stayed with the cover, so I'm all good there. Back over here on the left side of the bike, I'm going to pull this little clip that holds the power valve actuator on. And if I can do this with one hand. There it goes. Now you just pull it out and drop it down, and I got lucky. It fell, but it didn't fall in the motor. Okay, so I'm going to be careful not to lose that, and then I'm just going to pull straight out on this rod here and get that loose. Next, I'm going to pull the bolts that hold the power valve mechanism in place. I'll be right back with you. To point out what I'm going to remove next, I want to take this Allen bolt out. I don't necessarily have to take this one out to clean the linkage. Okay, I've pulled that bolt out. Now I'm going to reach in here and pull the right side of the power valve out. What I do is I rotate it up and grab hold of this knob, and you can just pull it right out. And there's the gunky right side power valve. Okay, now that I've got that pulled out, it's hard to see up in there, but there is a dowel rod that is in there, and I'm gonna reach in with a pair of needle nose and pull it out and drop it on the floor. But here's what I was after, was this dowel rod. Okay, next I'm going to take a small Phillips screwdriver and I'm gonna put it in the same hole that the Allen bolt was in, and I'm going to push with that screwdriver. And if I go around on the left side of the bike, you can see that I pushed another dowel rod out, just like that other one. And when I pull it out, the exhaust valve fell out on the floor, which is what I got right there. And then finally, I can grab right here with my hands and I can pull out the last piece of the power valve that we're going to clean, which is the left side power valve. Okay, so here's all the parts I just removed, sitting on a rag. They're dirty. I am going to take them to a bench grinder with a wire wheel, and I'm going to clean it up. That's the best way I've found to clean this stuff. Most solvents won't cut it. So I'll be back after I've cleaned these parts up. Okay, I have the parts cleaned up. What I want to point out here is that these surfaces here on what I call the drums, there and there, are the ones that really need extra good cleaning, because they have to rotate in the bores on that cylinder, and they're the culprit on what causes the power valve to stick. And of course, naturally, I want to clean up the edges of this flapper here, but this is kind of how it all fits together. And if I can do this with one hand, you know, the actuator arm moves this drum here, and the through rod down in here causes the flapper to move up and down in the exhaust port, and the drum on the other side to rotate in its port. It's kind of a, I don't know, I don't think it's a very efficient way to do it. It's almost like trying to drive a car from the passenger seat when you rotate this drum here. But that's how it's designed, and I think that's part of the problem, is that there's not a lot of force that makes it over to this other side. Okay, we're ready to go back together with it. I took a rag with some solvent on it and cleaned out these bores a little bit before I went back together with it. Notice I've stuck a dowel rod in here just a little ways. Next, I'm going to put the flapper in. Notice the orientation that I have it, with this kind of groove on top. All right, so I'm going to push it up through the exhaust port, get it into here, and push the dowel rod in through the hinge holes. Okay, so I have the exhaust flapper in. That was the first thing I installed. I shoved the dowel rod through those hinge holes, and notice the flapper in there. I can move it with my finger. So pay attention to how it goes in. Make sure you get it in the right side up. Okay, next I'm going to install the left side power valve along with one of the dowel rods into the left side of the motor. I'm going to make sure that dowel rod goes through the slot on the exhaust flapper, and then I just push it in. That's all there is to it. By the way, I have coated all these parts with a light coat of two-stroke oil before I install them. Okay, next I'm coming over to the right side of the engine, and I'm going to install the right power valve. Notice that it has a hole in it. That is going to mate up with the end of the dowel rod that you can see when you look down into the hole. A little bit hard to see with it being dark like this. So you're going to need to locate that dowel rod by kind of rotating this until they engage. Okay, so when I push that in, I know that in order to get it to mate up, it's going to have to come down and get close to my actuating arm rod so I can push in until that mates. Okay, I had to put the phone down in order to accomplish that. I needed two hands. I had to use one hand to hold the power valve on the left side of the cylinder while I rotated and pushed this piece into place so that it would engage with that dowel rod. But it's all good now. I'm going to go over to the other side of the motor and put the access cover back on at this point. Forgot to mention that you do want to make sure when you put this Allen bolt in that it doesn't interfere with this right here. This is kind of a stop where it would touch the bolt. So in other words, make sure the bolt's not binding up this piece here when you snug it up. And you can notice I put the clip back on here. Now I'm ready to put the exhaust flange back on and the right side access cover. Okay, all finished with that. Have the covers back on, the exhaust flange back on. Now I'm just ready to put the pipe and silencer and tank and seat back on, and it'll be finished. Notice that I did not pull off the cylinder to do this. Obviously, if I was doing a top end, I would take that opportunity to clean these parts too. Also, word of warning, be careful with all these small bolts, especially these here. These are 5mm threads. You don't need to get carried away with them. Sure don't want to strip anything. All right, that's all for now. Thanks.